Do you have a paranormal encounter you'd like to share with us? Send us an email with your story for a chance of it being featured on Weird World. The following are 3 more true TIMESLIP accounts that blur the lines between past, present and future. Jack Sprat's mysterious encounter with a familiar man in the Cascades. Daniel Bennet, as a simple trip to a store becomes an existential crisis. And Malcolm Harris entered into the puzzling absence of a well-established clinic. These stories remind us that, on occasion, time, reality itself, isn't always quite what it seems. A timeless reunion. Jack Sprat had always harboured a deep love for the outdoors. Born in the great Pacific Northwest, specifically the Western Washington Cascades, he was fortunate to spend the early years of his life basking in nature. Accompanied by his father, the two would hike through the mountains, hunt and fish. The Cascades held special spots that Jack eventually came to know as intimately as his own reflection. One particular spot close to his heart was Goblin Creek, located up the Index Galima Road off Highway 2. During his childhood, Jack and his family would often drive there. While up there, their adventures usually comprised fishing, shooting and hunting for a unique type of rock. When cut and polished, the halved rocks would reveal a scenic image reminiscent of a mountain view seen from within a cave. The stones had a name Jack couldn't recall. He simply knew them as picture rocks. An art gallery and a mineral shop that belonged to a friend and neighbour of Jack's father bought the picture rocks, fetching a decent sum of $2 a pound. It was quite a lucrative source of income for a young boy. Transporting these rocks from the creek to the adjacent dirt road wasn't an overly long journey either. However, it held the potential to get a person lost if they didn't know where they were going. Despite the countless times Jack had visited this creek, he had only ever seen 2 other people out there. The first was a game warden, attracted by the sounds of their gunfire during target practice, who came to ensure that all was well. However, Jack's encounter with the other is one that he continues unable to comprehend. At 14, Jack vividly remembers one such trek. Laden with a backpack brimming with these special rocks, he was making his way back to his father's truck when he stumbled upon a man, seemingly in his early 30s. They were both surprised by the encounter, as it was rare to bump into anyone in such a secluded part of the mountains. But as the distance between them closed, the man's surprise morphed into sheer alarm, as he began to look as if he'd seen a ghost. He remained silent as Jack walked by, with a gaze fixed on him that seemed as if he was searching for the right words to ask a question. Once past the stranger, Jack was struck by how much the man resembled someone who could belong in his family. The likeness was startling. Jack continued to the truck, deposited his load of rocks, and then returned to the river where his father was. Upon reaching his dad, Jack recounted the peculiar encounter and asked him if he had noticed the man, but he responded that he hadn't seen anyone. Nevertheless, the encounter etched itself deeply and remained vivid in Jack's memory. 11 years ago in 2012, Jack had decided to visit his family in Snohomish. Compelled by nostalgia, he felt an urge to revisit Goblin Creek. It had been a considerable 15 years since being there. On his way, he learned that the Index Galima Road had been eroded by flooding many years prior. Fortunately, Jack remembered an alternative route via Jack Pass. Upon reaching the familiar dirt road, he parked at the same spot his father used to. As he made his way through the woods towards the creek, he was met with a bewildering sight that sent shivers down his spine. Halfway into his walk, he spotted a young boy, roughly 14 years old, making his way up from the creek, a weighty backpack adorning his back. To Jack's growing amazement and confusion, the boy bore an uncanny resemblance to Jack's younger self. He intended to address the boy as their paths crossed, but words eluded him, the magnitude of the moment weighing heavily on his tongue. The boy made his way past, and Jack continued a bit further, until the reality of the encounter hit him like a tidal wave. The memory of his past encounter surged forward as Jack grappled with what had just occurred, that he had just relived the other side of an experience from his teenage years. Both the man and the boy were him, separated by a 15-year gap. Urged by a mix of disbelief and urgency, Jack quickly spun around, hoping to catch up with a younger version of himself. He sprinted back to the parked truck on the road, only to be met with emptiness. There was no sign of the boy, even though there were limited paths he could have taken, and Jack was sure his reaction hadn't been delayed long enough to lose him completely. The boy had vanished into thin air. Driven by an insatiable curiosity, Jack hastened to the creek. A part of him anticipated seeing his father, perhaps 15 years younger, fishing by the bank. But the creek was deserted. Jack returned home, grappling with this impossible encounter. He felt it was too surreal, too unbelievable to share with friends or family, instead opting to seek answers from others online who may have faced similar experiences. The Dollar General disappearance. This incident unfolded 6 years ago in 2017. Daniel Bennet resided in Plattsburgh, New York, USA, on what seemed like an ordinary evening in Daniel's hometown. He wrapped up his dinner and, despite it being just past 8 in the evening, felt an overwhelming urge to sleep. Succumbing to this fatigue, he went to bed and enjoyed a deep sleep until roughly 7 the next morning. Upon waking, a glance out of his window revealed a strange sight. The buildings and his neighbours' homes seemed to have taken on different colours. Perhaps it was just grogginess from having just woken, Daniel thought. Craving Cheerios for breakfast, Daniel headed to the fridge, only to find it devoid of milk. "What the hell?" he exclaimed in frustration. Resigned to his situation, he figured a quick trip to Dollar General was in order. Daniel owned both a motorcycle and a car. Opting for the motorcycle, he thought the brisk morning air might help clear his head. However, as he approached an intersection, he noticed the usual traffic lights were missing. In their place were blinking lights. Finding it strange but not giving it too much thought, he carried on. But another oddity soon became apparent. Despite it being early morning, the sun stood high, casting shadows as if it were mid-afternoon. As Daniel neared the Dollar General's usual location, he was compelled to slam on his brakes. Instead of the familiar storefront, a construction site sprawled before him. Confusion took hold. Did they tear down the store? Why would they do that? Daniel wondered. Over at the construction site, a worker noticed Daniel as he parked his motorcycle on the roadside and approached. Daniel was too confused and determined for answers to pay any concern to potential consequences for trespassing. Construction worker. "Hey, you're not allowed here." Daniel. "Why are you tearing down Dollar General?" Construction worker, looking puzzled. "What do you mean? How do you know this place is Dollar General? We're not tearing it down, we're building it. You need to leave now. This area is for authorised personnel only." The dialogue might not have unfolded precisely in this manner, but it was something along these lines. Daniel was taken aback by the worker's words. The realisation almost caused him to faint. Without hesitation, he dashed from the site, mounted his motorcycle, and sped back towards home. To his shock, an unfamiliar car was parked in his driveway. He jumped back on his motorcycle, racing once more towards Dollar General. However, upon his arrival this time, the sky had grown dark. The familiar Dollar General storefront had returned, and the accompanying parking lot was full of cars. Everything seemed to have gone back to its regular state. Daniel pulled over, staring at Dollar General, lost in his thoughts. Suddenly, the flashing lights of a state trooper's car disrupted his contemplation. The officer approached, stating that Daniel had been speeding 65 miles per hour in a 30-mile-per-hour zone. Daniel tried to explain his bizarre experience, pleading with the officer to believe him. The trooper simply replied, "That's going to happen sometimes." Too early for my appointment. Malcolm Harris had a health condition that necessitated yearly visits to a neurologist. By the age of 22, he had been consulting the same doctor in the same building for around 5 or 6 years. On the day of one of these appointments, Malcolm drove to the familiar location, parked, and approached the usual entrance. To his surprise, the door was locked and the interior was barren. The room was void of the usual furnishings. No chairs, no desks, absolutely nothing. The door also lacked any signage or markers, but Malcolm was certain he was at the right place. Confused, he checked the neighbouring office, only to find it similarly locked and empty. All of the 8 offices in the building appeared to be vacant. Bewildered, Malcolm returned home, thinking perhaps the clinic had relocated and neglected to notify him. However, a few hours later he received a call from the clinic checking up on him to see if he was okay. Malcolm mentioned that he hadn't received their new address, causing confusion on the other end. The staff member on the call informed them that they hadn't moved and had been located there for many years. Later research confirmed that the clinic had resided there since the 1980s. He described his experience, mentioning the locked and empty rooms. The woman on the line expressed concern, stating that she hadn't seen him, even though he was the only scheduled patient for that hour. Given his account, she suggested he visit an emergency room, suspecting a potential medical issue. Malcolm kept himself from the clinic for nearly 2 years, haunted by the unsettling incident and fearing a potential break from reality. But at 24, he mustered the courage to revisit. The office was exactly where it had always been. Malcolm was left baffled by the inexplicable event, and part of him wasn't sure he ever wanted to uncover the truth.